70,000 years ago, our species stood on the edge of extinction, huddled in small bands across the African savanna. We were not the strongest creatures on Earth, nor the fastest, nor the most fearsome predators in the night. What we possessed was something far more dangerous: the ability to dream of distant horizons, and the courage to walk toward them. Not just a migration, but the greatest journey in human history. A walk that would carry our footsteps to every corner of the globe. What if our ancestors had stayed in Africa, never daring to cross the threshold into the unknown world beyond? The Earth itself was changing then, locked in the grip of an ice age that painted continents white and dropped sea levels hundreds of feet. And somewhere in that frozen world, a small group of humans made a decision that would echo through all of time. They looked toward the horizon where Africa met Asia, and they began to walk into a future none of them could imagine. This is the story of how we became everywhere, written in our bones and blood, carried in every cell of every human alive today. Have you ever wondered what it took for those first pioneers to leave the only world they had ever known? The journey began in the Great Rift Valley, where stone tools and ancient campfires still whisper of our origins in the African earth. Our ancestors had lived there for hundreds of thousands of years, perfecting the art of survival beneath the endless African sky. They knew every waterhole, every seasonal path of migrating herds, every plant that could heal or kill with equal certainty. But the climate was shifting, becoming drier and harsher, pushing resources to their limits and forcing difficult choices upon every living thing. Some groups moved north, following the Nile River like a green thread through an expanding desert of sand and stone. Others pressed east toward the Red Sea, where the narrowing waters between continents beckoned like a gateway to another world. The crossing itself may have happened during a period when sea levels dropped so low that land bridges emerged from beneath the waves. Imagine standing on that ancient shore, looking across at distant cliffs that marked the edge of everything your people had ever known. The decision to cross was not made in a single moment, but in countless small choices, one footstep at a time into the unknown. Children were born on that journey who would never see Africa again, carrying only stories of the homeland in their parents' voices. What drove them forward when every instinct screamed to turn back toward the familiar warmth of the African sun? Perhaps it was hunger or curiosity, or simply the restless human need to see what lies beyond the next hill and the next. The first humans to reach Asia found a world unlike anything in their ancestral memory, strange and hostile and utterly new. They encountered creatures that had never seen a human before: giant elephants, saber-toothed cats, and bears that stood taller than trees. The land itself was different, with seasons that swung from brutal heat to killing cold in ways the African climate never had. Yet somehow, they adapted, learning to hunt new prey, gather unfamiliar plants, and read the patterns of foreign stars at night. Stone tools found in the Levant tell us they paused there for thousands of years, establishing camps and raising children in that threshold land. But the migration did not stop at the edge of Asia. It was only the beginning of a journey that would span 50,000 years. Some groups turned north toward Europe, following rivers and coastlines into territories where Neanderthals had lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Others pressed east along the southern coast of Asia, island hopping through what is now Indonesia toward the distant continent of Australia. Still others moved north into the heart of Asia, learning to survive on windswept steppes where winter temperatures could freeze exposed flesh in minutes. Each environment demanded new innovations: warmer clothing, better shelters, different hunting strategies, and entirely new ways of thinking about survival. The humans who reached Europe 45,000 years ago walked into a world of ice, where glaciers ground mountains into valleys of stone. They shared that frozen landscape with Neanderthals, and the evidence suggests they did more than simply coexist in the cold. Genetic studies reveal that modern humans and Neanderthals interbred, leaving traces of Neanderthal DNA in everyone of European and Asian descent today. This was not conquest but a complex story of interaction, competition, and occasional cooperation between two human species on the edge of survival. Meanwhile, the coastal migrants moving east faced their own extraordinary challenge, crossing open ocean to reach Australia 50,000 years ago. This required boats, navigation skills, and a willingness to sail beyond sight of land toward an island continent they could not have known existed. When they arrived, they found a land of giant marsupials, enormous lizards, and birds that stood twice the height of a human being. Within a few thousand years, most of these megafauna would be extinct, though whether from hunting or climate change remains a matter of scientific debate. The Aboriginal Australians, who descended from those first arrivals, would maintain an unbroken cultural connection to that land for 50,000 years. Back in Asia, other groups were pushing north into Siberia, adapting to conditions so extreme that survival itself seemed like an act of defiance. They developed sophisticated cold weather technologies, tailored for clothing, portable shelters, and the ability to hunt woolly mammoths across frozen plains of endless white. These were the ancestors of the people who would eventually cross the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas 15,000 years ago. Can you imagine the courage it took to walk into a landscape where no human footprint had ever marked the snow? The Bering Crossing happened during the last ice age, when so much water was locked in glaciers that a 1,000-mile-wide land bridge connected Asia to Alaska. The first Americans walked across that bridge following herds of mammoth and bison, carrying with them stone tools and the accumulated knowledge of 50,000 years of migration. Within a few thousand years, their descendants would reach the southern tip of South America, completing humanity's colonization of every habitable continent on Earth. This was not a planned conquest, but a gradual expansion, driven by population pressure, curiosity, and the simple human tendency to keep moving forward. Each new environment shaped the people who entered it, selecting for different traits, different survival strategies, and different ways of understanding the world. Skin color changed as populations adapted to different levels of sunlight, becoming lighter in northern latitudes where vitamin D synthesis required more exposure to weak sun. Body proportions shifted, with populations in cold climates developing shorter limbs and stockier builds to conserve heat more efficiently in the frozen north. Dietary adaptations emerged as groups learned to digest new foods. Lactose tolerance in dairy farming populations, alcohol metabolism in rice cultivating societies, and high-altitude adaptations in mountain dwellers. What if these adaptations had continued for another 100,000 years, separating us into truly different species across the continents? But they did not, because humans never stopped moving, never stopped trading, never stopped sharing genes and ideas across the boundaries of geography and culture. The Great Migration was not a single event, but an ongoing process that continues even today. In every airplane and ship crossing the oceans, not just a physical journey, but a transformation of consciousness itself. As humans learn to see the entire world as home, rather than just one valley. Yet the journey came at a cost, recorded in the bones of those who did not survive the crossing. The frozen bodies of children who died in blizzards. Entire groups vanished without trace, their genes and stories lost forever in deserts, mountains, and seas that claimed them as the price of exploration. The archaeological record is full of these silent endings, abandoned campsites, scattered tools, and skeletal remains that mark the limits of human endurance. For every group that succeeded in colonizing a new land, dozens more must have failed, turned back, or simply disappeared into the vastness of geological time. This was evolution in action, not the slow change of species over millions of years, but the rapid adaptation of culture, technology, and human ingenuity. Fire became more than a tool for warmth and cooking. It became a symbol of human presence, a declaration that we belonged in every landscape we entered. Stone, that ancient material of our first tools, was shaped differently in every new land, adapted to local resources and specific needs of survival. Ice itself became a teacher, forcing innovations in shelter, clothing, and food storage that would have been unnecessary in the warm African climate of our origins. The human brain did not change significantly during these migrations, but the knowledge it could hold and transmit expanded exponentially with each new challenge. Language evolved and diversified, splitting into thousands of distinct tongues as populations separated and adapted their communication to new environments and experiences. Art appeared on cave walls from France to Australia, suggesting that wherever humans went, they carried with them the need to create beauty and meaning. These paintings are not just decoration, but evidence of minds capable of abstract thought, symbolic representation, and the transmission of cultural knowledge across generations. By 10,000 years ago, humans had reached every major landmass except Antarctica, adapting to deserts, rainforests, tundra, islands, mountains, and plains with equal success. The total human population was still small, perhaps only a few million people scattered across the entire globe in small bands and tribes. Yet those few million carried within them the genetic diversity of our African origins, a legacy written in DNA that scientists can still read today. Modern genetic studies have traced the migration routes by analyzing the patterns of variation in our genes, creating maps of ancient journeys written in our very cells. Every human alive today carries markers that reveal their ancestors' path out of Africa, a molecular record of the greatest journey ever undertaken by any species. The San people of southern Africa carry the oldest genetic lineages, closest to the ancestral population, from which all other humans descended 70,000 years ago. Europeans and Asians share genetic markers that reveal their common origin in the populations that first left Africa and settled in the Middle East. Native Americans carry distinctive genetic signatures that trace back to the Siberian populations, who crossed the Bering Land Bridge into an empty continent. Pacific Islanders possess genes that tell of epic ocean voyages, island hopping across thousands of miles of open water in outrigger canoes carved from single trees. These genetic maps do not divide us into separate races, but reveal instead the underlying unity of our species, the shared heritage of our African origin. We are all Africans, in a sense, carrying in our genes the memory of that ancient homeland and the journey that brought us to every corner of the earth. The migration changed us, but it also changed the world we entered. As humans became the dominant species on every continent they colonized, megafauna extinctions followed human arrival in Australia, the Americas, and many island ecosystems. Though the exact role of human hunting remains scientifically debated and uncertain, forests were cleared, rivers diverted, and landscapes transformed by fire and agriculture, as humans learned to shape their environments, rather than simply adapting to them. This was the beginning of the Anthropocene, the age when human activity became a geological force capable of altering the planet itself in profound ways. Yet for most of human history, we remained just another species, vulnerable to drought, disease, and the countless dangers of a world we did not yet control. The Great Migration was not a triumph of conquest, but a story of survival, adaptation, and the remarkable flexibility of human culture and technology. Today, we are still migrating, still moving across borders and oceans, still seeking new opportunities and escaping old dangers and patterns as ancient as our species. The tools have changed from stone to steel to silicon, but the fundamental human impulse to explore and expand remains unchanged. Across 70,000 years, climate change is once again reshaping human migration patterns, just as it did in the Ice Age that first pushed our ancestors out of Africa. Rising seas, expanding deserts, and shifting weather patterns are creating new refugees, new journeys, and new chapters in the ongoing story of human movement across the earth. What will the next 70,000 years bring? And will our species still be recognizably human when that distant future finally arrives? The Great Migration teaches us that we are not separate races or nations, but a single family. Descended from a small group of African pioneers who dared to walk into the unknown, every human language, culture, and tradition is a variation on that original African theme, adapted and transformed by the environments our ancestors encountered and survived. The stone tools of our ancestors lie buried in sediments around the world, marking the path of our species like breadcrumbs leading back to our African home. Fire pits cold for 50,000 years still contain charcoal that can be dated, revealing the camps where ancient families gathered to share food and stories under foreign stars. Ice cores drilled from glaciers preserve ancient atmospheres, allowing us to reconstruct the climate conditions that shaped our ancestors' migrations across continents and millennia. These are not just scientific data points, but connections to real people who lived, loved, struggled, and died to give us the world we inhabit today. We carry their legacy not just in our genes, but in our restless curiosity, our adaptability, and our capacity to thrive in every environment Earth can offer. The Great Migration never truly ended. It simply transformed into the complex, interconnected global civilization we navigate today, with technologies our ancestors could never have imagined. And somewhere in our DNA, in the deepest parts of our being, we still remember that first journey out of Africa, when we walked into the unknown and became everywhere.